Hi, I'm Adamsen. We're back here in Lincoln Hall, and I'm here with Mackaluso from ADP, longtime friend and colleague. Eric, thanks for being here.
Oh, my pleasure.
A pretty nice place we're at, yeah?
Oh, it's amazing, yeah.
Isn't it amazing? I am, again, really excited because you and I have known each other for a number of years. You've been doing great work for a long time. We have 70, 80 colleagues here from around the country, and we're talking about how people, data, and analytics are going to do good, not only for organizations, but for the people within it. Can you speak to a little bit about what you do and what brought you to this role at ADP?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, my teams have always been about using data and using visualizations to really drive better decision-making. I take a very business approach to the field in that we could play with data all day long unless we're playing with that data to drive better decision-making and actually drive actions on behalf of companies to affect change and make companies better and make decision-making better. That's really where our focus is. So I think I'm being here with a bunch of other peers is great. We're not only talking and learning, we're presenting and having discussion, which is a very unique experience because a lot of other things, conferences, you get a lot of people speaking at you, where this is more of, we're going to do a couple speeches, you're going to see some presentations, and then you're going to take notes and actually discuss in between. So I think that's a big value. Now,
one of the things that struck me when we first met, 10 years ago or so, is the fact that you are a consummate learner. So even though you are accomplished in this space, you're still open-minded and creative. And with that in mind, things have changed a lot over the last 5 years in particular, right? With the proliferation of data and the elegance of the tools by which to aggregate the data, analyze it, and visualize it. So, what's your perception of where we're at in the people analytics space right now?
I mean, there's definitely a change, whereas, early on it was about getting your dashboards right and about taking the data and about cleaning it and really trying to drive some insights. You saw that kind of shift when you went to getting more statistical analysis and valid hypothesis type testing and then more to the data science piece. Mm-hmm. And a lot more of the data nowadays that I'm being asked to look at is unstructured. Mm. We're surveying everybody on everything and having to ingest all of this data, where in the past, we could get scores and things, but now you're surveying different things. You're surveying hires, you're surveying employees on engagement, you're surveying as people walk out the door, just all the time. And so we have all this unstructured data, and it's coming in so fast that the traditional tools that HR has always had to analyze the HRS data, we need to go get more skills and different skills to come in and handle it. And that's kind of been one of the bigger ones. So one of the things we're working on right now is really around natural language processing and actually being able to analyze some of these texts. Nobody wants to read through 100,000 comments, but yet they want to know what is being said. Mm-hmm. And so I see a little bit of a change from the structured to the unstructured. And then also, as a result, I do see the field and people analytics supporting some of that digital transformation a lot of companies are talking about. Yeah. I don't know if anybody has it figured out, but we're now supporting some of those digital initiatives to make sure that if they implement RPA or digital processing, they're doing it in the right place to get the best value. So I see a little bit of a change coming there.
Can you speak to that more in depth? Because yes, most every organization is doing some type of digital transformation. HR organizations are transforming digitally, whatever that means for them. People analytics, people measurement often lives elsewhere. Project happens, digitization processes are innovated, and all of a sudden there's data being generated, and a people analytics team all of a sudden has to deal with that. What I'm hearing from you is that it's best to integrate those efforts so you can think about the data that might be generated in the first place. Is that a fair statement?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what does that look like? Is there just more governance, project management, program management? What do you advocate be done, or what is being done there at ADP to address this?
Yeah, so I mean, part of ADP has always been about the data and always been about the insights. So when our new CHRO came in just over a year ago, he came in with a vision. There were 5 core transformation projects he wanted to have happen. and they set it up so every single one of those projects had a project manager to make sure the work was getting done and getting reported back out, and somebody from my team that ensured that whatever data needs that project needed, that they would have a direct connection to our team. And so it was really just ingraining it in from the start to say, if we have a data need, if we need to understand something for this process to work, or we just need to know how many people this would affect, that we got brought in early. So there's always been a project manager and then somebody from our team involved with every one of these 5 projects.
Got it. So those 5 projects, can you share those? No? If not, no big deal.
No, I can. I'm not going to share them all.
I put you on the spot.
I'll share a couple. So one of them is at the base, is upskilling of the HRBP.
Okay.
As untransformational as that sounds, we've been hearing the exact same thing for 10 years.
Yeah.
So it's really meant now's the time to really make that work. Yeah. And so we have a project where we're bringing in a number of vendors into the space and looking at what skills do we need, what model do we want our HRBPs to operate in, and what skills and courses can we put in front of them to make sure they're actually learning what they need to learn to go into the future of work. That's one. The other one is really around the HR digital transformation, and that's more what I would call shared services based. So really trying to take some of those things that aren't value add, that are very manual, and implementing digital technologies like RPA to do them much more efficiently so we can utilize those resources other places where we can really drive the employee experience.
Got it. So I'm going to step back a little bit to go back to this point that you just described, namely around the HR business partner and digital transformation process, both inside HR and out. There's so many tools out there. There's so much data, as you stated earlier. How do you prioritize? If I'm a CHRO, business leader, head of talent, head of HRIT, it's like, how do I choose? What do you do? What do you advocate?
You can't be everything to everybody.
Right.
And I take my marching orders from our CHRO and his direct reports. Mm-hmm. And even sometimes they get mixed up in the prioritization. Mm-hmm. So we get asked to do 100 things. I will have my team focus on the top 20. How we focus on the top 20, that's a little bit of science, a little bit of art. Yeah. Because we can't necessarily drop the other 80 things, but we can work with the requesters or the projects or the teams that are asking for these things and make sure they understand that we have finite resources and these top 20 things take priority and we'll get to them at a certain point. But a lot of that process of making sure we focus on the most important thing, it's in the moment. Yeah. Something could be very important this week, next week it isn't. So there's a little bit of if somebody asks for something today and it's urgent, if we don't do it till next week, do they still need it? Yeah. And so every now and then we'll toy with it to say, if you really need this, can it wait till next week? But it also depends on who's requesting it. Right. Because if the CHRO comes asking, the CEO comes asking, then that's by default priority. The other stuff, it's a lot harder to do.
And what you just described is typical of many people analytics professionals, whether they be an individual or small team or part of a bigger team, where particularly if the people analytics capability is doing a good job. And what do? They create an appetite for more deliverables, more insight. And then it begs the question, where do the innovations come from? Does the people analytics COE have time to innovate? Is that their job? And where I want to land with a pointed question is there's systems being selected all the time, whether it be survey vendors, new ATS, LMS, all this stuff. Yet historically, people analytics professionals have not been part of that selection process and really understood the data that is going to come out of that technology once that process is changed, to accommodate that new technology. So what does governance look like for you? That's the pointed question. And does it enable innovation to happen? Do you have to do skunkworks projects? Do you make sure that digital and operations and finance and legal and all these other key stakeholders are involved on an ongoing recurring basis, or is it more ad hoc?
Whew, that's a long pointed question.
Yeah, it is.
A couple quick thoughts. So the amazing thing in our space is, I think back, if you build it, they will come. Mm-hmm. So I came in ADP it'll be 3 years in December. Mm-hmm. And I came in with a mandate to really, make sure the function was modernized, was focusing on business problems. And to use the words of our past CHRO, I want you guys producing stuff like our product teams. Mm. And so, we started with a couple small things and it grew and people saw, oh, who did that? Who built that dashboard? And then it grows and grows. And your team doesn't always necessarily grow. Yeah. But the team at ADP and my leadership has been very supportive of the function. And they have been able to give the additional resources and the tools and the things we needed to do our work. Mm. Now, to the other point around, is it push versus pull? I would say some of it happens organically when we're working on a business problem or working with a team on something. We'll say, you know what, this would be a very good idea. Perfect example, we were working with our legal team on some EOC analysis. It's basic reporting stuff. It's nothing sexy. But it was something that our legal team needed to assess the hiring risks to ensure we were EOC compliant and those types of things. So we had a couple of people on the team build a live dashboard that our legal team could use to monitor these things real time. Yeah. And before they didn't have that tool. That was something that we said, hey, we could actually do this. Nobody was asking us for it, but we saw the need. There are other times when our CHRO will say, hey, I saw an article on this. This organizational network analysis looks pretty cool. What could we do? Yeah. And he'll give me a call and he'll be like, I have this great idea. Which is great because we actually have HR people who are paying attention and leadership that are paying attention to what's going on in the space and what other companies are doing. And so I would say it's probably, we don't have all the time to think that we would like. Mm-hmm. Because we're constantly running around and doing things, but the time we do have it comes organically because we're working on something. We say, hey, we could probably do it better. We could probably do it this way. I'm not going to say it's a 50-50, that the pull versus push is 50-50. It's still it's probably an 80% pull versus a 20% push.
Got it. And I love the notion of us as, again, people on like COE, if you call it that, having a product mindset where we're actually building something that's going to solidify, that's going to sustain capability broadly, and then going and building again, and at the end of it, you have something that's different. The idea that we're building to enable HR business partners, there's so many things that they do that are immensely, of course, valuable. There's a constant longing for them to be more strategic and be talent advisors, both in terms of recruiting and engaging and optimizing productivity and all these things. So how much are you involving the HR business partners in what you're crafting? If you're implementing design thinking approaches, you would involve them arguably, quite a bit. Potentially you just, hey, they don't know what they don't know yet. We're going to just throw something out there that's going to, be the iPhone, and that we know they're going to use it. We're going to place a bet that we're going to use it. So can you speak to that? How much are you involving the HR business partners?
So it's a great question because we actually talked about this last week, and it was in the theme of an agile mindset, where we could go out and gather all these requirements, and it will take us a year to build something. My team does it. First, we look at what we need and we build it, and then we show it to the HR business partners and let them give feedback. So we'll build something first. We'll know the majority of the requirements and how it's going to be used, but we build it, have the first kind of iteration, if you will. Then we bring them in and say, hey, this is what we built. Will this work? So we kind of do it in an iterative stages. But the HR business partners are involved, but probably further down the pipeline.
Got it.
Yeah, as opposed to being in there at the beginning.
So we touched on this before. So let's say you're building these products, and many HR leaders, IT leaders, business leaders, CFOs say, oh, we're spending X million dollars for that HR system, and it's a transactional process-centric tool, and they being the vendor might say, well, we do analytics. And so there's an assumption that, okay, we're going to have analytics once that gets implemented. We both know that that's not the case. You're obviously aggregating data from disparate data sets. You're grabbing, text data and all this other stuff, depending on the business question. So at the end, how do you scope these projects and ask for budget and resources? Because that is a tough thing, particularly when the people that you're trying to quote unquote sell to don't really understand what's required. They don't understand the technology requirements, the data requirements, sometimes of which you have to purchase, and the expertise that needs to be brought to the fore to actually get something done. So how do you budget, and if sell's not the right idea, how do you get project approved?
How do we get project approved? I'm lucky where I have a little bit of political capital under
which
my
you've
belt.
earned.
Yeah. If you were starting out from scratch and you hadn't built up those relationships and actually delivered value, that political capital doesn't come cheap.
Yeah.
So that is one thing that we have going for us. The other one is really about understanding. I presented to our sales HRBP team a couple weeks ago. They were having an onsite, and they said, Eric, we really want you to come and speak about all the work you're doing and kind of show us how the things that your team is creating and the products that are giving us can benefit us and make our job easier. Probably half of them were actively using our stuff and getting insights from it. The other half were dabbling. Right? You're not going to have every business partner pay attention. But in that meeting, they were having questions around, why don't you do this, or why don't you do this? And that question of those multiple systems of record, those multiple data points started coming out. And I said, well, I could do that if, and I would list off a litany of things. And they said, well, why can't we get there? And I said, well, we are, but it's going to take a while. But when we ask for something new, we've been fortunate that working for an HCM company, fortunate or unfortunate, depending how you look at it, a lot of things you can ask for, they will say, oh, we can build it. Like, why are you going to go buy it when we can bring in our product people, build it, and then have a SME supported product that they could put to the marketplace? So it's a very different, coming from my prior company, where if we wanted a product, we'd just go buy it, into a company that can say, hey, that's actually great. We could productize that and sell it. Why don't you work with us to make that happen?
That's cool.
There's power there. There's power there for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, to emphasize that it has that product first mindset, that we're not just going to transact and do things on an event-driven basis. We're going to stand up these capabilities. So can you give an example or two? What's hot for you and ADP? Is it hiring? Is it D&I? Is it, all the above, all the usual suspects in terms of what you're trying to get at?
It's D&I is at the forefront of a lot of what we do. We've had a very strong D&I and culture presence. It's always up there. Yeah. The hiring bit, I would say, is there, right? But it's more about the skills. It's more about what skills will we need in the future as we go through these digital transformations. Every company's doing it. We're looking more internally facing at our talent and saying, what if we could have a marketplace where if I needed somebody for a project and they needed X, Y, and Z skills, that I could go someplace and see who in this company has these 3 skills, I need them on my project. So not necessarily a direct team thing, but more like an informal team that's working on a project. Right. So I see a lot more in the skills and the more loosely aligned networks of getting things done, right? We hear a lot about O&A. Obviously, I have a big interest in O&A just within ADP and wanting to explore that more. But I think we're kind of focused on using data to drive insights, really setting up the next phase of all of these technologies, right? So whether it be payroll, whether it be core HCM with integration into being teams, whether it's trying to drive performance acceleration with products like Standout, it spans the gamut, and it really is from hire to retire. I don't think there's one area that is getting more love than others. Okay.
And so what I'm hearing in that, do you talk about employee experience? Do you talk about candidate experience and those notions?
We do. In fact, one of the first things our new CHRO did was, I want to introduce an HR NPS survey. And everybody's like, what do you
Net promoter score, for those who don't know.
Net promoter score, yeah. Everybody's like, we do that with our clients. Why do you want it with HR? And our CHRO said, if Carlos Rodriguez, CEO, comes asking, how am I doing? I want to be able to tell him. And so we did. We kicked off our first HR NPS survey. We surveyed a fairly large percentage of the population with, how's HR doing? Scale is 0 to 10, how do you think we're doing? And then 2 text questions. Why do you give us that rating? And then the second one was, what could we do better? And we just completed our second NPS survey. And so now we have a baseline we can track, and we have all the verbal comments, we have all the text, and we can see what business units, what countries, what locations, what tenure ranges, what age buckets, what they think of HR.
Yeah.
And that's from an associate experience, because ADP calls employees associates. From an associate experience, we now have an understanding that we didn't have before about this is what our associates think of us.
That's huge. That's I could just picture how valuable that's not only right now, I imagine, but over time, because obviously you'll be able to see trends. At what frequency is that survey administered?
So now we have a baseline. We do it every 6 months.
Okay.
So we will survey the entire company every 2 years.
Okay.
So 25% every time we do it.
Got it. And so as we start to wrap up, you and I have talked over the years around, and we just touched on it, the employee experience, because these people within the organization, whether they be employees, contractors, if they're within the walls, they're generating data. And much of that data is available to us as analysts, depending on the nature of the privacy concerns and all that. But we oftentimes historically have been focused on delivering the organization value and not the individual employee. So what's your thinking on delivering value back to the individual, him or herself, or the teams of which they're a part? Because are you trying to drive value down to those levels as well?
Yeah, I think it's about understanding that whatever HR or my team does with the data, it's always with the focus that it's for the benefit of the employee. We're not creating predictive turnover models to weed out who's at high risk, right? We want to be able to understand those factors that are causing people to walk out the door, because we want to improve, we want to fix it. Yep. And we're doing the same thing with our hiring practices, right? By opening up our talent pool to include certain groups we might not have looked at before, because the data says we should. These are all things to help the employees and help the employee experience. I just think part of it's a marketing issue. Yeah. Whereas a lot of people think, oh, HR is there for the manager, they're there for the company. A lot of what we're doing influences decision-making that really has a positive impact on the employees of an organization.
Yeah, well, thank you for saying that, because I not only believe that to be a trend, I also believe it to be necessary in our discipline as we move forward and to enhance trust, not only for that COE in that particular organization, but for us as a discipline, because right now we're gaining more leverage. If data is the new oil, as is often said, can or should we be appreciated more than we have been historically? And if we're going to be appreciated, there has to be a level of trust that we know what we're doing and that we're protecting the interests and delivering value back to those individuals who are generating the data in the first place. So again, as we start to wrap up, any closing comments or ideas that come to mind based on our discussion for maybe a CHRO or HR business partner that might be listening?
I would be interested in when the first people analytics person becomes a CHRO. I think it's not far off, given the drive to go digital, given all of the data that an HR organization is producing. I would say for those of us out there that are
you raising your hand, by the way?
Not yet. But I would like to see that day, because I think HR might operate a little bit differently if that were to happen.
Yeah, and I agree. That day is coming. So, hey, Eric, always a pleasure. Thanks for sharing, sir.
Thank you.